Welcome to WAB-ART Productions. This year is 2025, so in 2 years' time it will be 2027, which means really this channel will need to be renamed Beethoven 200 because it will be the 200th anniversary of the death of Beethoven, one of the giants of the art world in music. As a prelude to that, I invite you to look at the playlist section, which has been revamped, hopefully to make it easier to navigate through. So you will find recordings of music under their composer names, but certain things like the Bruckner symphonies, you will find them under the names of conductors for the symphonies, particularly 1 to 9, but also 0 and 00. I've added all 4 of J.S. Bach's sons, where really the music side of this channel actually starts. It's centered around the development of the Germanic symphony. So you have W.F. Bach, C.P.E. Bach, and then J.C. Bach and J.C.F. Bach. There is a beautiful piece, the Beethoven Septet. So that's the first piece I've added that is not a symphony to the Beethoven playlist, but obviously as I increase the recordings I add to the playlists, the Beethoven section will be subdivided into symphonies, concertos, keyboard works, chamber music, and so on. You'll also find, which is way back in time, a significant artist called Albrecht Dürer, an amazing artist, and fully took advantage of printing and being able to distribute his creations to a far wider audience. At the other end, we also have the Swiss painter Arnold Böcklin, perhaps most famous for his painting The Isle of the Dead, of which there are actually 5 versions, but what a phenomenal piece of art that is. Fantastic inspiration. Böcklin had this beautiful relationship with the subject of death from a living perspective. There is a beautiful painting, it's like a self-portrait, where he's got this skeleton figure with a violin whispering in his ear, and he really captures that sort of look of he's listening to what's being said. There's a communication going on there. There is a communication through art. It is a very misquoted quote that is said all wrong. It lacks the pauses. Our Father who art in heaven, just out in one. It needs to be more like the symphony where there are pauses. So it's our Father who, because there's a statement and now there's a question. Our Father, well, who? Art in heaven. By definition, heaven is the imagination where creation starts, which an artist does often from imagination and inspiration. There is a manifestation of a painting or music or poetry or writing. This channel could go far, far wider with all of this, and will do so. It will create this wonderful online library. My knowledge outside of music in particular is such that I'm not that familiar with some of the Germanic world artists from other mediums of expression like sculpture and poetry and writing. Certainly there is Schiller and Goethe that I could be adding to this channel. But if you have any other suggestions, do please let me know so I can add an even greater variety that encompasses at least 7 of the arts. Incidentally, there is no definition exactly of what the arts are. Some say 7, some say 9. But I want to keep it really to this sort of Germanic sort of sphere from the 18th to the 19th century. The reason for this is because I saw, or from my perspective, what I see, what emerged in what became Germany in the 18th and 19th century, particularly with the unification, was this flowering of art. But of course that got twisted and corrupted as it went into the 20th century, because it was such a huge influence and so inspiring, and the potential of where that could have gone if it was allowed without politics and things getting in the way, what that could have gone on a very different trajectory, which I would suggest would be far more beneficial today. But within the art, the artist has put heart and soul into what they've created. If you can penetrate beyond that superficial surface level of any piece of art, you'll know exactly what I mean by that. It's learning a language which is communicated in feeling from what you take in through the visual and through the audible, through the 5 senses in the external, how it feels inside you, how that communication through that artist of the art in heaven is relayed and conveyed, and how in turn that can uplift and inspire. So for example, Arnold Berklin's painting The Isle of the Dead went on to inspire Sergei Rachmaninoff to write an orchestral piece called The Isle of the Dead, and Max Reger wrote 4 tone poems inspired by 4 of Arnold Berklin's paintings. So just a little update really on, and to make you aware of the sort of revamping of the playlist, so hopefully it will be far more logical, far more easy to navigate for you to find the different pieces. Certainly with the Bruckner symphonies, you'll find there are multiple recordings by different conductors and different orchestras, because they all bring out something slightly different, their own perspective as an artist in their own right, and their vision and their interpolation of what the creator of those pieces of music was conveying is then given on maybe a slightly different perspective. So there is something to be gained from all these different recordings, something that is very uplifting and inspiring, I find. So I thought I would share that with you, and I thought it's about time I brought out a new video on this channel. I don't know where the time goes, but as much as anything else, I like to listen to the pieces of music first before adding them to the playlists, to say, yeah, there's some of the early Mozart symphonies I've added as well into another playlist. You'll find most of the Haydn 104 symphonies that have nicknames are in a playlist as well. But I invite you to check out the 4 Bach brothers, especially CPE Bach. There is the embryonic flowering of this Germanic symphony that would permeate into Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven and beyond. It makes a beautiful tapestry that sort of stretches back 2 centuries or so, when the world was probably a very different place, far more simpler than today. But with the technology, at least you have access to be able to hear this music than having to make the effort of trying to find a concert hall. And how often do these music venues play specific pieces of music, some of the obscure ones, for example. I actually found a bassoon sonata by a composer called Schneider. the bassoon is one of my favourite instruments, and there's not that much in the way of works where the bassoon is given the limelight, as it were. But that's one example. But of course there is Carl Maria von Weber, who wrote a bassoon concerto, and if I remember rightly, an andante for bassoon and orchestra as well. It's got a lovely sound, just my perspective of course, but it's all there in the playlist for you to find, and have fun and enjoy.